If there's one multi-medium where music has had trouble peacefully coexisting with the other elements, it's the world of video games. While film and TV have scores synced down to the frame and even something like theatre can be scored to a relatively stable time, video games have trouble integrating music because the player defines the experience. How can you write a score for something where one player might take 5 seconds and another might take 5 hours? To get around this, video game music has often cheated to give the impression that it's intertwined with the rest of the media, such as having scores for in-game cutscenes that are essentially movies, or looping a single track for as long as a player takes, to even, sometimes, having little music at all. But one game released this year that I think demonstrates excellent video game music design. At every step, the music is so intertwined with the experience that the two are basically inseparable. It was released on March 20th this year and features a cast of creatures and a playable human protagonist, and that game is... In this video essay, I'm going to be exploring why the music in New Horizons is so well crafted, and why it sets a model for all genres of games to follow. I'm going to begin with how the music of New Horizons is intertwined at all levels of the game's systems. Next, I'm going to explore the diegetic music in the game. And finally, I'm going to examine the story. Firstly, let's talk New Horizons systems. If you've never played Animal Crossing before, this is how the game works. The game time is tied to the real world, so every second in the real world corresponds to 1 second in the game. The world reflects this, so during winter the world will be a snowy wonderland, and in summer it'll be a luscious green paradise. The game is essentially an escapist reality simulation game. You can build a house, catch bugs, fish, build things, plant things, harvest fruit, dig up fossils, and so on. There's not really an aim to the game other than to enjoy yourself. Some people might want to build up their island, while others may prefer living in the deserted island the game starts you with. There's no real right or wrong way to play, and there's no punishments for playing how you want to. The music comes into the game's systems through the time mechanic. Since Animal Crossing works according to real time, we can split the game's systems up based on what time level they fall into. At the top, we have the monthly cycle. Included here are the seasons, what fish and bugs are available, and any special events. Next, we have the weekly cycle. Every week, you have a random group of visitors assigned to your island, along with KK Slider and Daisy May each weekend. After this comes the daily cycle, where things like the shops and fruit refresh day to day on your island. After this is the hourly cycle, which determines whether shops are open and what fish and bugs are available to catch. Finally, there's what I will call the random systems, which include things like rain or snow, which happen randomly but also affect things like fish spawns and some other things. The cool thing about New Horizons is that music doesn't just tie into every single one of these systems. It is the only part of the game that ties into every system. Each hour of the game has its own unique musical loop that plays as you explore the island. If your island begins to rain, then the music has its own rain arrangement where the brass is replaced with a more mellow marimba. This is what that sounds like. Every day you are able to buy a new album from the Nookstop machine. Every week, KK Slider will give a live musical performance. And certain seasons, like winter, have their own variants of the hourly theme, because snow replaces the normal percussion with sleigh bells. If you want to go a step further, we could talk about how the yearly cycle, which pretty much only has birthdays in it, also has a musical element, as it's the only time you can hear KK Birthday. No matter which level of time or system you are interacting with in New Horizons, you are forced to interact with the music, but it is so subtle most players won't even realise that it's happening. Additionally, another level of interaction exists for dedicated players in the game's creation tools. While most creation tools in Animal Crossing are dedicated to designing furniture patterns or clothes, the game also lets you compose your own small track for the island tune. This is the little tune that plays in different instrumentations when you talk to each villager, and is a small way of allowing the player to further customize the game to their liking. There exist many how-to videos as well for how to put famous tunes into the game, reducing the musical knowledge required to interact with this system. This further allows players to customize their island and game world, which is a major theme of New Horizons. The next major musical element of New Horizons is the game's diegetic music. Diegetic music is just a fancy name for music that is actually played in the world, as opposed to a score layered over the top. For instance, in The Avengers, Tony Stark's playing of AC/DC is diegetic, he's actually playing the song and we, as the audience, are hearing it. But the Avengers theme that plays during the battle isn't. We're hearing this as part of the movie making process, the heroes aren't hearing it. New Horizons has a whopping amount of diegetic music, 95 original songs, each of which is based on a real-life genre style. These songs are performed by the game's famous musician KK Slider, a dog which also happens to be based on the series composer Kazumi Totaka, but we'll get to KK Slider a bit later. These diegetic songs are available for purchase, and then you can register the songs and play them at any time. These songs tie into another aspect of New Horizons, collecting. Any Animal Crossing player will tell you that the game has a big focus on collecting, whether that be fish, bugs, fossils, and art for the museum, different reactions, the perfect kitchen set, recipes, and even music. However, whereas most of the collections in Animal Crossing are small, furniture sets consist of a few items so as to not clutter a room, there's around 80 unique collectible fish and about 40 reactions, the amount of music to collect in New Horizons is the second largest collectible in the game, second only to the 600 DIY recipes. For any completionists playing New Horizons, you have to engage with the music for an extended period of time. If you want all 95 songs, you have to play for months, maybe even years. New Horizons doesn't just plop the music in front of the player, it passively asks you to seek it out, to find everyone and listen to it, by goading you into getting more collectibles. Another impressive thing is just how much music there is. These weren't all written by Totaka, and some will have carried over from previous games with some touch-ups, but there's just such an impressive amount of music content here for a game that, on the surface, wouldn't appear to have a big focus on it. There's so many genres here from all around the world that it really does feel like this big love letter to music. The composers have really tried to follow the conventions of the style, and overall, because it's Animal Crossing, it just has this cutesy animal vibe constricting everything. Just listen to KK Scar.
Oh, me oh now me oh me oh me oh. Now me quick oh me quick.
So far, we've seen how music is important to all aspects of the systems of New Horizons, as well as the mechanic of diegetic music. Now, we'll explore the story of New Horizons, because this is where the kicker is for music's importance. I mentioned earlier how KK Slider is based off of series composer Totaka. This is important because the entire plot of New Horizons revolves around you building up your island enough so that KK Slider, or Totaka, will come visit. Everything you do in the game is based around getting the musician to come to the island. And if you want complete control over your island, you have to get KK Slider to visit. There's no other way to get the terraforming kit. KK Slider also acts as the mouthpiece for the development team in the game. Early on, you're visited by the stream of KK Slider, who gives this inspirational speech that is basically the game's development team telling you to just enjoy the game and have fun. The plot of New Horizons is bookended by a dream visit from KK Slider and a real visit from him by the end. It may sound like I'm joking, but I'm serious. The plot of New Horizons revolves around music, and the player has to engage with the music to finish it. So now that I've convinced you on why music and New Horizons are so intertwined, I thought it would be good to reflect on what games can do to integrate their music better. Obviously, not every game can do exactly what New Horizons did, but there's still a few key lessons here. Let's start with systems. At the moment, very few games intertwine their systems with their music, instead opting to use music to represent locations or story beats. Video games are defined by their interactivity, and so music should have more of a connection to a game's systems. For instance, imagine a role-playing game where the battle music begins with a simple percussion rhythm at level 1 and adds more layers as your characters progress through the story, so that when you're at level 40 you have a big, bombastic battle theme musically representing your journey. We've actually already seen something similar to this in the strategy game Civilization, where, as you advance your technological age, your music will transform from basic instruments to futuristic ones. Imagine a shooter where each enemy is tied to a musical layer so that as you clear enemies, the music becomes less and less dense until you're hunting the last character with just a drum beat and then silence to represent the end of combat. Imagine an action game where the tempo adjusts with the flurry of your button presses. These are just a few examples, and I'm not exactly a game designer, so I don't know how hard these would be to implement, but the musician within me says it would be worth it. Next, let's talk collecting music. Not all games have diegetic music, but some have ways of listening to music outside of the game world, such as a jukebox feature. New Horizons shows us that music is better integrated when these collections have a player incentive, even if there isn't a big one. Additionally, it can encourage players to explore new parts of the game world or replay old sections. Rather than just having a jukebox available, try and include ways of making the player collect songs for it, such as by playing certain sections, meeting particular goals, and finishing the game. Giving the player some small input over the music, like New Horizons' Island tune, can also be a good way to engage the player with the music. Finally, let's discuss story. We don't want every game to begin having a music-focused story because that would be boring. However, musicians always exist, and probably exist in your game world, so use them to tell interesting stories. Some clever ways of doing this include the accordion playing Cass in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, who plays his accordion and sings a folk song telling of a secret nearby. These little additions allow music and your story to intertwine in a natural and believable way without subtracting anything from the story you want to tell. What games have you played with excellent musical integration? Leave a comment below, and remember to like this video and subscribe to never miss a new one. See you next time.